Hello, this is Randy again. Thank you for joining me for Brain Break with Randy and KeithO. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my father. My father was a university professor who taught accounting. He was a consultant to the FBI to teach them how to spot fraud. He was a pretty learned man and a very popular teacher at the University of Arizona. In fact, I think it was 7 years in a row he was the most popular instructor on campus, which is pretty incredible. But my dad had a near fatal disease. He was in the Navy during World War II. His brothers joined the Army and his brother-in-law, and they didn't want him to be in the Army and face what they were going to face because they were going to England. So he joined the Navy. And because of his testing and innate knowledge, they made him a radar technician. And first he installed land-based radar, and then he was able to install it on ships like aircraft carriers and destroyers, and finally on planes that were on the aircraft carriers. He had some interesting stories for us, but he loved the ocean. He just couldn't get over how much he loved the ocean. He grew up in a small community of Utah, Gunnison, Utah. In the middle of Utah, once a year they might make a trip to see a lake. There were creeks around, but nothing like the ocean. He was just totally enthralled with the ocean. When I was 6 or 8, my dad bought a 15-foot skiff with an outboard motor. It wasn't but a couple of years later that he moved up to another boat, about 2 feet longer, and then another boat, then another boat. He'd always sell one and buy another one, just a little bigger. And so we called his disease two-footitis. And by the time I was a young married man and wasn't available anymore to help him every weekend, go fishing or do the other things he liked to do, he had moved up to a 53-foot yacht, sport fishing yacht. And my dad loved to fish. He was a very, very good fisherman. We went to Alaska to go fishing with him. He lived in Juneau for 8 years. He told us, now you watch, people are going to follow me out, and then they're going to anchor all around us. He was right. There were 4 boats that followed us out, and they anchored all around us. He says, and the funny thing is they're not going to catch fish. We will. And then when we leave, you watch, they're going to fight over my fishing spot. I was just rolling my eyes like, Dad, you're so full of it. That's exactly what happened. It was crazy. We were catching amazing fish. The salmon had not yet come in. This is around the 4th of July, years and years ago. So we were fishing for halibut off the bottom. He had studied the charts closely enough that he knew where these underwater canyons were. That's what we were fishing in. Everybody else was fishing, say, at 90 feet. We were down at 200 feet. And what would happen is these big lunkers, the big halibut, would basically just wait for the bait or another fish to swim by, and they would open their mouth and swallow it. Then you just had to, we called it horsing them up, but basically just pull them up off the bottom. They really didn't fight much until they saw the boat. Then they would fight. Now, at that time in Alaska, you were only allowed to keep the 2 biggest per licensed fisherman. And so what they would do, I kid you not, they would shoot the fish in the head so that it would not fight during this process. And you'd put a tail or a rope around the tail. Then you'd take that same rope and put it through the fish's gills and tie a stick on it. So now the fish is bowed. Then you would tie that to one of the cleats on the boat. They didn't hurt the fish, believe it or not. They'd just hang in the water. But they couldn't swim because they were in that bow shape. Doing that, my wife, who had never been fishing before in her life, caught a 107-pound halibut. She also caught a 12-foot-long lingcod. The only bad thing about this amazing fishing trip is she never wanted to go fishing again because she said, how can I top that? Now, I caught a bigger halibut than my dad had ever seen. It weighed out at 169 pounds, and it was probably at least 7.5 feet long. We were so excited to get back with our fish from that day. We went and weighed the fish, and my dad was just ecstatic because this is the biggest halibut he'd ever had brought onto his boat. The guy that was manning the weigh station said, "Well, you ain't seen nothing." He pointed out into the parking lot and he said, "See that car over there?" My dad says, "No, I just see a fish." "Is that on a car?" It was. It was a halibut that weighed 382 pounds. In it, they put it over a Volkswagen Bug, and it touched the ground on all four sides. It was incredible. I forgot to tell you one part of the story that you might get a kick out of. My younger sister, who was, I don't know, 8 or 9 at the time, helped put out the rods, and she, by mistake, grabbed a freshwater rod that wasn't set up for using in the ocean. It had it was a really springy pole, and it had a 4-pound test line on it. And that's what my wife used to bring up that 107-pound halibut. It took her 45 minutes, but she didn't break the line, and she brought it in all by herself. So that's probably part of the reason why she didn't want to go fishing again. But we had a great time up there in Alaska. If you haven't been, you need to go. It's an amazing part of our country. And if you get a chance, go fishing or make a chance. It was wonderful. We had a great time. We never got any salmon. We did get halibut. But I'd fished for salmon before, and I missed catching salmon because they're a fun sport fish. But I really liked eating the halibut. And we lived in Mesa, Arizona, and my dad lived in Juneau, Alaska. And every year they would have a sale on air freight. And my dad would buy a year's worth of air freight on this sale. And once a month, he would ship us a 50-pound box of frozen halibut and salmon. That's how much he caught and had available. In fact, in his home, he had 3 32 cubic foot freezers filled with fish for eating. I'm sure that saved him a lot of money over the years. And I've never had a freezer that was 32 cubic feet, but they were huge. And it was just an incredible experience to go up there. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. Loved it. I'm sure I'll tell more experiences from that same trip. Thank you again for watching and listening to this podcast, Brain Break with Randy and KeithO. I hope you have a great day. And if you've still got a father around, make sure and tell him you love him. Today at church, a young man, it's Father's Day, came up and just gave me the biggest hug. I tease him a lot. I talk to him. He's 12, and he gave me this amazing hug. I mean, it was a squeeze. And then his father doesn't live here, and he sees him a few times a year. He loves his father. But he gave me this big hug. I couldn't move. And then at the end, he says, "Happy Father's Day. I love you." And that meant a lot to me, even though I've heard from my kids and my grandkids today. It's nice to know that someone else loves me too. Again, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Bye now.